1967, Tay Ninh Forest 3rd. Core. The dawn glowed red dew still clinging to the leaves. A U.S. engineering team stopped their trucks in front of a Rome Plow, lying motionless in an open clearing. Second Lieutenant Robert Klein, a 25-year-old engineer officer, crouched to examine the 2-ton steel blade torn apart down the middle. Private Harris ran his hand along the crack and shook his head. "Not a shell or a mine, sir." Mr. Lang, the civilian engineer, accompanying the unit, pointed at a cluster of stunted roots. "The ground here's been disturbed before. The roots are shallow, unnatural." Klein looked up toward the tree line ahead. The clearing job had gone easier than the map suggested. Too easy. "We're cutting through the jungle to prevent ambushes," Klein said quietly. "But if someone already planned our route for us, then who's really leading whom?" The wind moved through the canopy, sounding like a faint distant laugh from the forest. During the Vietnam War, the Liberation Forces ambush system operated on the principle of the road is a death zone. Route 13. Highway 1, Route 22. Each artery became a chain of linked traps. M15 anti-tank mines were buried shallowly beneath the red laterite. When a track rolled over one, it would blow out the hull. Along the verges, infantry mines and camouflage tripwires hidden in the Kogan grass formed a second layer of death. When a convoy stopped, shooters in the trees would open fire at ranges under 50 meters. Canopy trees 25 to 30 meters high overlapped into a closed vault, masking sight from the air. Beneath the canopy, vines and undergrowth were so thick, American troops needed machetes to cut a 1-meter gap, leaving armored columns able to see only 10 to 15 meters ahead. Ambushes occurred on average 2 to 3 times a week, along the 50-kilometer stretch from Tay Ninh to Saigon. From 1965 to 1968, 3rd Corps alone lost 180 motor vehicles and more than 900 soldiers to mines and ambushes. U.S. command quickly realized you cannot secure 200 kilometers of highway with infantry patrols alone. A 40-man platoon could only control 2 kilometers of road for 4 hours before having to withdraw to base. A tactical idea was born. Instead of defending existing roads, create entirely open corridors. Clear lanes, 100-200 meters wide, running parallel to or cutting across the highways with 2 objectives. First, expose a minefields. Every piece of metal would be turned up by the bulldozer blade. Second, deny the advantage of concealed approach, clear the undergrowth so the enemy could be detected from 300 meters. The plan sounded simple, but required unprecedented scale. Infantry with axes and chainsaws could clear only 0.2 hectares per day. To open 1 kilometer of corridor 150 meters wide required 15 hectares equivalent to 75 platoon days. Deploying that across the 3 corps demanded thousands of platoons and would take months, an impossible task. The tropical forest was a mechanical opponent, trunks 1.5 meters in diameter, roots 3 to 4 meters deep, interlaced like biological concrete. Infantry or civilian bulldozers were powerless. Their blades would break after only a few hundred meters. The only solution, industrialized deforestation. The U.S. needed a tool powerful enough to turn jungle clearing into an assembly line, like logging in Oregon, but the objective was the battlefield. The question arose, if the enemy turned roads into death zones, could the U.S. turn the forest itself into a weapon system? In 1966, at the engineer repair yard in Long Bình, among rows of scorched steel frames, a civilian engineer named Rome, who had cut roads through the forests of Washington state, stood before an old Caterpillar D7E, holding the drawings for a new bulldozer blade. He was not a soldier, but that experience had brought him to Vietnam. Rome handed the blade drawing to Second Lieutenant Robert Klein. On the paper was the outline of a thick steel plate, its edge studded with serrated teeth like a predator's jaw. Klein returned from Tay Ninh with a notebook filled with mine coordinates, and the depth of the basalt soil, studied the drawing for a long time, and then said, "If you can pull up roots, pull up the mines too." That remark changed the blade's geometry. The lower section was beveled at 45 degrees, cut down 40 centimeters, creating a horizontal flipping motion that would pry up both tree roots and buried objects. Rome nodded. "You'll handle field testing." Klein replied, "I'll let this blade talk to the jungle." From that sketch, the Rome Plow was born not merely to clear jungle, but to reshape the battlefield. The serrated teeth bit into trunks, severing bark and sapwood. The lower blade shoved into the earth 30-40 centimeter lifting main root masses, flipping them onto the surface and removing the entire root system. The result: stumps. Overturned roots snapped surrounding soil. Churned trees could not regrow from root suckers. The blade was designed to flip soil laterally, producing a 3.5 meter wide tilling effect with each pass. Anti-tank mines buried at roughly 20 centimeters were pulled to the surface. Infantry mines were thrown clear. But the machine remained vulnerable. A single RGD-5 grenade tossed into the cab could kill the driver, and an RPG-7 B-40 hit to the track could force the crew to abandon the vehicle. Hence, the field armor kit was developed. Interlocking armor plates were fabricated at the Bien Hoa machine shop from 12mm thick plate reclaimed from old landing craft. The cab was fully enclosed on 4 sides, the roof covered with a 5cm mesh to reduce the chance of a grenade being tossed in. The windshield was replaced by 4 layers of 50mm polycarbonate rated to stop 7.62mm at 50 millimeters. The cab door was reduced to a 40x40 centimeters opening. The tracks were shielded with angled steel plates to lower the hit profile. Machine weight rose to about 21 tons, but working speed remained about 8 km/h. The crew operated as a 3-man team. The left side driver steered. The right side assistant ran the hydraulic controls and watched both flanks. The third, usually a gunner, rode on the cab roof with an M60 covering a 180-degree field of fire. Teams of 3 bulldozers ran in shifts, 1 lead machine with 2 follow machines, spaced roughly 50 minuters behind, creating a corridor about 100 minutes wide. Each morning the engine started, and black smoke rose into the canopy. Blades lowered teeth, bit the earth. Metal shrieked and trees crashed in a steady rhythm. Roots were flipped, red basalt soil scattered. Mines detonated sporadically, but typically ahead of the machine, not under the tracks. The crews pushed on their goal, a stretch of open ground, stretching tens of kilometers, cutting across enemy operating areas. The Rome Plow gradually became a tool of battlefield shaping. An engineer at Long Bình once said, "We're not destroying the jungle, we're changing the tactical terrain." And each blade pass created a new geographic patch, 3.5 minutes, long per pass, roughly 100 minutes wide. March 14th, 1968, War Zone C. 3 Rome Plows from Charlie 9, 27th Engineer Battalion prepared to cut a corridor along Highway 13. Second Lieutenant Robert Klein stood on the M113 command vehicle radio, at his ear eyes fixed on the plastic map. Gomez holds the axis Torres watches left. We're plowing straight into their logistics area. 005, 55. Diesel engines roared. 3 steel blades dropped the root rake teeth, biting into the damp red earth. RP-41, driven by Sergeant Gomez, charged into regrown rubber trees, where last night an OV-1 Mohawk's infrared photos had shown 2 concealed bunkers about 60 meters apart. A trunk 70 centimeters in diameter crashed down, roots ripped up, and an intact M15 mine with its fuse still set flew more than 10 meters away. Torres adjusted the hydraulics aimed at the mouth of the first bunker. The earthen cover torn apart. The bamboo-reinforced roof ripped open, dust and rice spilling onto the red ground. RP-42 on the left plowed parallel along the dry stream. The blade lowered about 45 centimeters, flipping the bamboo and earth cover and exposing an 800-meter concealed trail. Inside the bunker, bloody bandages stuck to the walls and 12.7mm cartridge cases lay scattered. Corporal Kwok on the roof swung the M60 and fired short warning bursts when he saw a shadow move about 200 meters away. 006-30. The corridor reached 800 meters. A column of GMC 2.5-ton trucks from Ben Quay began rolling through without escort visibility, clear to 300 meters. 007-15. RP-41 hit a tangle of bamboo. Hydraulic pressure spiked. Gomez slowed to about 2 km/h. Torres adjusted the auxiliary valve and the serrated teeth bit and pulled up clumps of roots. Two small bunkers were revealed containing 3 DKZ 75mm rounds and fuel drums. Engineers following behind emplaced C4. Black smoke curled into the canopy. 08, 0. The team stopped 15 minutes to check the blade. One bent tooth was replaced in 7 minutes. Klein received reports ambushes on this stretch dropped by 90% in 72 hours. The soil used for burying mines had been churned up. 11:40. The corridor was complete, more than 4 kilometers long, cutting across the enemy's supply network. The supply convoy passed through safely with no casualties. Klein stood on the command vehicle looking at the glaring strip of open ground under the sun. "The jungle will grow back," he said quietly. Then he wrote in his notebook, "Each corridor lasts only until the first rain." From an idea in the Long Bình shop, the Rome Plow quickly became the tool to try answering that question across all of 3 Corps. From May 1967 to the end of 1971, the Rome Plow tore through the jungle like an unrelenting machine. Roughly 1,200 km² were cleared an area larger than New York, stretching from the 3 Corps to the Cambodian border. More than 20 land-clearing units each, with 20-30 machines, operated continuously. At the peak in 1968, about 300 machines ran at once, and the Long Bình shop worked overtime to keep them going. One Rome Plow could clear 1.5 hectares per hour. A 30-machine unit meant dozens of hectares stripped each day. The Industrialize the Jungle campaign temporarily exposed the enemy's logistics network, but it left terrain scars that both nature and the enemy quickly exploited. When the open corridors formed, the guerrillas withdrew deep into the forest, leaving only a few scouts to monitor from a distance. M15 anti-tank mines began to run short. They improvised using scattered 105mm artillery cartridge cases, stuffing them with 810 kilos of TNT, and making super heavy mines enough to rip a Rome Plow's track apart, even though the machine weighed 21 tons. Each mine was buried 60 centimeters deep, just off the corridor edge, where the root rake couldn't reach because its 45mm flip angle only dug that deep. Rather than burying them on the open lane where they would be found, they cut into the corridor's bank, dug small pits along the newly exposed berm, 3 to 4 meters from the open surface, just large enough for a gunner to lie in wait. On the 3rd night after a corridor was completed, a 5-man team returned to a recently cleared stretch near Ben Kui. They carried 12 mines, 200 meters of detonation wire, and 2 disassembled DKZ 75mm guns. Under dim moonlight, they stacked mines over the old cut, where the blade had flipped the soil and the ground had compacted, making an easy camouflage. Dry leaves and new Kogan grass hid the signs. After 40 minutes, the traces were gone. The next morning, a mine detonated against a machine's flank, tearing open armor and wounding 3 crew members badly. The engine still ran, but the unit had to stop 6 hours for repairs enough to delay the operation and let the guerrillas return to the area. From then on, they began ambushing at greater distance. A DKZ placed 800 meters into regrown forest could fire direct without elevation. An RPD gunner prone at the tree line 400 meters from a column could fire sustained bursts without fear of early detection because the undergrowth that used to absorb sound had been removed. One night in July 1968, on a newly cleared corridor near An Los, a convoy of GMC fuel trucks moved through foregoing armored escort, believing the area safe. 23:40. A DKZ round struck the 3rd truck. A 5,000-liter fuel tank exploded the blaze, lighting the entire corridor. The convoy stopped. Men jumped out seeking cover, but there was only open ground. With no cover, they were forced to reveal their positions, and RPD fire began from the forest edge. After 15 minutes, 4 trucks were burning and 11 men were dead. The convoy was forced to withdraw. The very daylight safety of the corridor had become a perfect nighttime firing lane. They could not destroy the Rome Plow with infantry weapons, but they used the corridor it created to ambush it back. Whoever controlled the night controlled the corridor, and the night belonged to the forest. When the Bear Corridor ran along the highway, the first thing that changed was visibility. Guerrillas no longer had to crawl under the canopy. Just standing on a tall rubber tree 1.5 kilometers away let them see every tarp, every vehicle line in the compound. On the second night, an 82mm mortar round struck the command tent. The error was under 5 meters. They did not guess. They saw. Roots were pulled bare, the soil lost its water-holding capacity. The early rains fell and washed the corridor red, stripping away the topsoil within days. The scars left by the blade turned into drainage ditches, channeling rain straight into the base. A landing zone near Soissau turned to muck. Helicopters could not land. Runoff accidentally traced old advance routes, and the guerrillas returned following those very lines. Tactical effects dropped quickly. A combat engineer lieutenant wrote in his journal, "We thought we were opening roads." In fact, we were carving signposts with our own hands. Inside the armored cab, the crew worked in high-heat continuous vibration and the pounding noise of diesel engines demanding prolonged concentration. Sergeant Elias Gomez, 29. The primary driver of RP-41 ran the blade polycarbonate windshield and hydraulic checks each morning before starting. To his right, Private Torres monitored the pressure gauges and adjusted valves to avoid overload, while Corporal Kwok on the cab roof covered the area behind the vehicle with an M60. 06-12. The blade dropped and began to dig into the thick topsoil. After a few meters, the crew heard a crack from a large root mass vibration ran through the control column, and the pressure gauges climbed faster than expected. Torres was ready to pull the relief lever, but pressure kept rising. The explosion came moments later. It was an improvised mine built around a 105mm artillery cartridge carrying about 12 kilos of TNT, designed to detonate at the vehicle's flank. A column of red earth shot tens of meters into the air. The blade warped the side armor, tore open, creating a gap that funneled hot smoke and dust into the cab. The polycarbonate windshield cracked from the shock, but held its structure. The blast wave traveled through the frame, dazing the crew for several seconds. A hinge seized from frame deformation. Gomez had to kick the emergency latch to get out. Torres was the first out, dragging Kwok, who had a leg injury. Gomez exited last with multiple small cuts from shattered glazing. The whole egress took about 12-15 seconds before fire reached the auxiliary fuel tank on the left flank. The crew pulled roughly 20 meters back and dropped low to avoid secondary fragments. RP-41 burned for more than 30 minutes before the fire was extinguished. After-action reports recorded the typical injuries for a Rome Plow crew: small leg fractures from vibration shock, minor burns, and persistent headaches from blast aftershocks. Armor protected against small arms rounds, but not against deep-edge blast waves placed at the corridor margins where the root rate could not reach. Long deployments also produced clear psychological effects. Repeated shocks and the thuds when the blade hit root clumps left a constant sense of latent danger throughout a shift. Medical data at Lai K recorded a higher rate of post-mission stress among Rome Plow crews compared with infantry units in the same area. Their risk came from both enemy weapons and the jungle's mechanical properties. High root density, high moisture, and variable topsoil made force transmission unpredictable. Armored cabs stopped shrapnel, but not the chain effects of blast waves, frame deformation, and shock transmitted back through the drivetrain. Still, they returned to the cab every morning because the campaign's progress depended on the speed of corridor opening, and any delay held up the supply column behind them. When casualty reports reached the field headquarters, Klein checked the box, "Cause corridor edge mine." He realized every meter of jungle plowed away did not only remove enemy concealment, it also handed them a cleaner firing axis. Under the pale green neon lights at Long Bình, civilian mechanics and engineers worked through the night. The operation ran like a mobile machine shop: repair, restart, move on. When a bulldozer tooth broke, they replaced it within minutes. Cracked glazing was temporarily taped armor, patched with scavenged scrap steel. A combat engineer lieutenant wrote in a report, "It's not just fixing damage, it's keeping the terrain changing on schedule." Costs climbed month by month. Each corridor opened fast, but the jungle grew back faster. An 18-hour mine could cripple a 21-ton machine, a waste rate no planner had accounted for. By 1973, when the Rome Plow program ended in the Third Corps, more than 200 serviceable machines were stripped of armor, repainted, and turned over to civilians. A few went to Thailand and Malaysia, others remained in depots rusting. At post-war meetings in Long Bình, Klein said tersely, "We can plow roads, but we cannot plow away the life cycle of the jungle." That line later appeared in tactical manuals as a caution, not a technical lesson. After Vietnam, the Rome Plow principle did not disappear, it changed form. In Iraq in 2003, modern D7Rs cleared both sides of the Baghdad-Fallujah highway to counter IEDs, creating 180-meter-wide corridors. In Afghanistan, the contest the environment first mindset returned in the Korangal Valley. No jungle but rocky hills and stacked villages were reshaped into fire belts. As war moved into cities, the principle moved with it. Fallujah 2004, Mosul 2017 lacking forests to plow. People plowed down walls instead. The Rome Plow vanished, but its thinking remained inside every tactical plan to control people, control the space they rely on to live. Years later, in a small classroom at Leavenworth, retired Colonel Robert Klein stood before a satellite image projected on the screen. The old bare strips cut by Rome plows now appeared as mottled scars across regrown forest. A student asked, "Sir, was the Rome Plow a failure?" Klein studied the image a long time and replied, "No. It did exactly what it was designed to do. We simply asked the wrong question." He pointed at the screen. Technology can plow a road, but it cannot plow the life cycle of an environment. If you do not account for that life cycle, every blade of steel will eventually turn back into a lesson for those who follow. The Rome Plow case reminds those who wage war of one simple fact. Any technology used to clear away a problem will create a new problem in the space it touches.